on average 70% less for energy from this summer after the energy regulator lowered the price cap to $2,074 a year for someone on typical use.
The Chief Executive of Energy Regulator Ofgem, Jonathan Brearley, joins us from now in Westminster. Good morning, Jonathan. You must be happy to be announcing some better news for once.
Good morning. Absolutely. It is good to announce that, given the massive drop we've seen in the cost of the gas and electricity we buy, prices are moving from what we thought they were, £2,500 a year, down to $2,074. But as you know, Martin, given the changes we're seeing in government support, this is still a figure well above what people were paying only 2 years ago. And I do know that that means many, many families will still be struggling to pay their bills. So it's a step in the right direction. The market is stabilising, but there's still a lot we need to do to support particularly those customers who are going to struggle this winter.
Well, you'll forgive me, I'm not going to use those typical use figures because I think they're meaningless for most people. I'm going to say it's a 17% drop. If you were paying £100, you're now going to be paying £83. And you're right about government support. The drop that you've got does not make up for the £66 a month that the state was giving over winter that's now gone. But that's not in your purview. What is, though, is the standing charge. The biggest single complaint I get about energy bills. And the standing charge, the very high standing charge, isn't dropping. You're doing the cut by the unit rate. Let me read Will for you. My standing charge for electricity went from 25p a day to 47p a day last year. What is the justification for that? And when can we expect it to fall back? A lot of anger over that. Why haven't you dropped it?
Well, what the standing charge pays for is two things, really. Well, overall, it's a fixed cost in the system. That's partly the cost of our networks, particularly our electricity networks, but it's also the operating costs of the companies themselves. Now, what we're saying today is we are opening up a conversation about half of that cost, that operating cost, which is about £150 out of the roughly sort of £300 standing charge a year. And we're going to be asking two questions. Is that the right set at the right level? But also, should we move that from the standing charge to the volume charge? And that's a way we can begin to have that debate. But this is not simple. You'll know, Martin, that last year we looked at another element of the standing charge and we asked the same question. We said, well, should we simply put this onto unit rates? The problem is always when you do that, there are many, many poor families who have high energy needs, partly because their children may have special needs or partly because they have disabilities, and they are made much worse off by such a change. So we are going to look at it. We are going to ask ourselves a question and ask publicly for views on that. But just to flag, there is no easy answer here. If you move costs from one part of the bill to the other, there are winners, but there are also people that lose out.
But you accept it's a moral hazard to make people pay £300 a year to have the facility to have gas and electricity, because when they're lower users, they can't cut back any more.
Well, that's part of the reason we're opening up this question around operating costs. But what we're trying to reflect are the costs of the system as a whole. So it is something we're going to look at. The other thing we are doing, government has already stepped in to equalise prepayment meter rates, for example. We're going to be looking at standing charge for prepayment meters alongside this. So we are going to be asking ourselves some very big questions about standing charges, but that will take time to come through.
Now, the next big thing that always comes through to me, people see the charts, they see wholesale rates are a fraction of what they were, and their price is only dropping by 17%. People don't think it's enough. Now, I know what your answer will be on this, but it's you who should give it, not me.
OK, of course. Well, let's start off, Martin, by looking at what the actual cost of our energy is for that average household. So for that typical household, costs right now are £3,200. Government is paying £700 of all of our bills right now, and that's what brings it down to £2,500. Now, when you take the whole drop in gas prices, that is roughly about £1,200 overall. So that is the drop that we're seeing, but part of that is the ending of the government support that also ends in July. The other thing, though, is that we ask companies to buy forward in the market. So they're not buying our energy for July right now. They're beginning to buy our energy for later on in the year. Now, what that protected us from last winter, when prices were extremely high, we're getting to £4,000, £5,000 or even £6,000 bills in autumn of last year. But it does mean that price falls take time to come through. The good news is that when the price drops, it will last for longer. So say prices spike next week, that will also take time to feed through. And the advantage we have with the price cap right now is we don't have the old world, which you'll remember, Martin, where people used to describe it as throwing up a rock and then prices coming down like a feather. So going up quickly and then coming down very slowly. This formula is broadly the same in that respect. So prices related to the wholesale market have the same time to come through, whether they go up or they go down.
So the price cap's dropping by around 40%, but we only feel 17% of it because the price before was already subsidised. And the reason people pay more is you push them to pay ahead. But what
Yes.
I have noticed in your release, currently you factor in energy firms are allowed to make 1.9% profit. And I think people will be staggered to hear that you're consulting on increasing the amount of profit that energy firms are allowed to make. I think that's not the best timing, is it?
Well, the reason we're doing that is that, well, there are three things we need to do this winter, just to start. One is fair pricing regulation, but the second is making sure that the sector is financially resilient. So you'll remember everything we went through in the end of 2021, and that put around £80 on people's bills when 30 companies failed. And what we're saying to every company is you need to have money in the bank. You need to have good risk management and you need to have money in the bank so you can last through the sorts of price shocks we've seen over the last 2 years. Now, they need to get that money from somewhere. So we are saying we're putting in place roughly an increase of about £10 a year to make sure that companies are financially resilient. That isn't to benefit shareholders. That is to make sure that customers don't face much bigger costs if companies fail.
And I'll let Kate ask in a moment, but I just want to finally finish. We have a perverse and broken energy market in the UK, that one of the reasons we've had these high costs is we price our electricity based on the highest generating cost, not the actual generating cost. We price it based on the cost of gas when that's been spiking. I mean, if we fix that, our prices should drop substantially. When is that going to happen?
Well, the government have a process in place. Ultimately, that sort of change requires legislation, but it does take time. This is a very, very complex market. So putting something in place as a quick fix usually ends up with lots of unintended consequences. So we're working with the government to make the changes you're describing, to see if we can find a better system that reflects it. I would say one thing, that since 2017, the contracts we have had with renewable generators in particular are in effect fixed price, so they're not affected by the price of gas. It's the old contracts for the new generation that we need to look at.
As Martin said, it's the happiest I've seen you in a while, so it's good to have some good news. When is this going to end, though? That's what people feel. Are we in this now? Will it come to an end, and when?
Well, look, you know, we have seen a massive shock to our market. We saw Russia withdraw a huge amount of gas from the market, and that drove prices up last year. Now, things are recovering, but as ever, it is incredibly hard to predict what might happen in the future. So prices are drifting down. The market is stabilising. I should add, we are hopeful, Martin, that we're going to see fixed prices enter the market in the second half of this year. But predicting when prices will fall back to where they were is extremely difficult. I think that will take time.
I'm going to take advantage of having you on. One of the biggest problems coming with fixed prices coming back is these days most firms do it by existing customer tariffs, not tariffs on the open market. And because of that, they don't have to publish their rates. So someone like me can't help people. People can't go onto comparison sites to see how they compare. Will you change the rules so that energy firms have to publish all of their tariffs, including the existing customer-only ones, please?
So we're going to have a look at that and we will come back. We do see the problem. What we were most worried about actually was firms offering tariffs outside of their company, so keeping their customers on a high rate and offering cheap rates to bring customers into the company later on. But all of this for us is around transparency. So we can't commit to it right now, Martin, but we're happy to look at it.
I'll be on the phone to you in a week or two and we'll have a bigger discussion. I'll speak to you then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.